Hello, amateurs, and welcome back to our 6Nations series. And I've got a very special guest with me today. It's Mike Petretta from the Fratelli D'Rugby podcast. Hi, Mike, and welcome to the show.
Hi, Tim. Thank you for having me. Really excited to speak today.
Yeah, brilliant. Welcome. So in this episode, we are going to be looking at the Italian team in some depth and how they're shaping up for this upcoming 2025 Six Nations. So, Mike, could you just give us a little rundown of the last 12 months? What's the Italian team been through? Where are they at right now?
Yeah, so obviously from the last Six Nations, Quesada had, I think, a week ahead of the Six Nations to start sort of preparing and implementing some of his opinions on how the game should be played. So I think what we saw right at the start of last Six Nations was maybe slightly more of a hangover from the previous Six Nations with our previous coaches. And he was very vocal in terms of what he's trying to achieve this year is to try and sort of slowly adapt to a slightly more efficient game. So that's why we saw back end of last year a little bit more of risk, I suppose. So in the autumn internationals, we saw a transitioning Italy, and actually we saw some deficiencies there as well against a few of the teams. But over the course of the last year, team hasn't changed too much. The team has more caps, they're more experienced, and obviously, as we know from last year, we went in with the youngest national team. So a year on, more experience. The game has changed slightly in terms of like the game style and how it's going to be played. Let's see how that transitions into the Six Nations. But in terms of club level, Benetton obviously doing quite well in the Champions Cup is always a fun one as well.
Yeah, for sure. It's interesting that you say about transition there during the autumn, because I could kind of see that in the players and the performances. It looked like they weren't quite a well-oiled team. It looked like there were some mistakes because of misunderstanding, maybe.
Yeah, I think that's a fair observation, to be honest. We were fortunate enough to go to that Georgia game, and for a team that, frankly, right, dominated the game, probably 60 minutes of the game, they had 2 breakaway tries. It was it was an interesting game to watch. Obviously, Georgians with some mountainous defensive work, especially to deny 3 times at the last sort of 5 yards and twice over the line. It could have been a very different score, but obviously against the best teams, we need to learn how to become efficient in the 22, because I feel like that's still something where we're trying to figure that out, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, let's look at the squad. And as you mentioned there's a lot of players in there now that have got a decent number of caps. And when I look through the list, I recognize almost all of these players, and to some degree. And you've got some good guys coming back as well. People like Stephen Varney, Delocchi, and Tommy Allen as well returning to the squad. Just say a few words about those guys.
Yeah, so I'll start with Tommy Allen. Obviously, he's had a really impressive year in France. Obviously, he chose not to be involved at the back end of last year's Six Nations due to sort of family commitments and moving to a new country. Obviously, there was an element of settling in there as well, and he's a young father, and all of the difficulties that also come with that. So, but he has really settled in. He's been playing a lot of sort of fullback. He has been playing 10 as well. He's been kicking at goal. He has looked very impressive. Varney has been probably almost like at the other end. He's recently transitioned to France. Had he maybe gone slightly earlier in the season, we would have seen him included in the autumn as well. But obviously, with limited game time, it's always a struggle for players just to step into the international test level. But we know what he can be at his best. Let's just hope that he finds a bit of confidence. And Delocchi, obviously, he recently came back, solid scrummager, looked good. He's a player that's really sort of struggled with injury over the past sort of 2 or 3 seasons. He's someone who has, played well, got picked up by London Irish, didn't see a single appearance in London Irish because he was injured the entire time. London Irish folded, went to Benetton, got injured immediately, and he's just come back. And fingers crossed he can and because he is a bit of an asset at set piece. So yeah, three interesting players for sure.
Yeah. While we're talking about the front row, a new player in there in Luca Rizzoli coming in for the missing Mirko Spagnolo, who was one of my favourite players from last year's Six Nations. What's up with Mirko? Where's he? And maybe tell me a little bit about.
Yeah, so unfortunately, in the I think it was in the second derby match in the URC, he croc rolled Zambolin, and so it was one where, unfortunately, it's completely self-inflicted, and even with good behavior and all of that jazz, the minimum entry is six weeks, so he's actually not going to be available for the first two Six Nations games, but possibly one of the most informed loose heads in the URC, possibly one of the inform in the Northern Hemisphere at the moment. He's just come out of nowhere, and he's just a brilliant scrummager. He has one of the highest turnover rates per minutes on the pitch. I think he has the highest turnover rates for minutes on the pitch out of any other player, considering he's a front row. That's quite impressive. He is a very impressive player. So he's going to be sorely missed against both Scotland and Wales.
Yeah, I was super impressed with him last year's Six Nations. A few other players missing, Louis Liner, Paolo Dogwu, and Zambonin in the back row. And another thing about this squad, which I really love, is that you've only named two centres.
Yeah, it's interesting with the centres, because obviously we have quite a few players who can play centre. Obviously, we have Bertaccini as well, who is the third centre. He has sort of come out of nowhere as well. He's not even playing for one of the franchises. He's actually in the Serie A elite, but he was a really impressive under-20s player, and he's recently had a few caps at Zebra, and he's looked very, very good. So really excited to see him obviously take that step up. And then we have some utility players, I suppose. Obviously, Garbisi can play 12 if we need to. Marin can play 12 or 13 if we need to. But realistically, if Brex and Menoncello are fit, they're playing. Just outright, they're playing.
Yeah, of course. They might be the best centre partnership in the world, genuinely.
Yeah, I am a big fan of Tui Pelotu and Hugh Jones. Obviously, shame about Fiona in a different in a different breath, because obviously, you want to be playing against the best players, but they are definitely some of like the most gelled centre partnerships in the world, just because they play in, day out, and they know each other very well. So yeah, really excited to see them play again.
Yeah, me too. Now then, talking about how they're going to play, let's get into that a little bit more, because we've talked a bit about the transition. A few years ago under the previous administration, it was literally play from anywhere, and that came a cropper a few times. But I do think that gave you a real basis of how to move the ball, and a confidence, and a sort of a base in building skill levels that you're now using in a slightly more pragmatic way. So what do you think are we going to see in this coming Six Nations?
Yeah, I think slightly more pragmatic approach to the game. So obviously I was fortunate enough to speak to Crowley a week or two actually before his departure was announced. And I think his sort of ethos and how he envisioned it, Italy developing was always one step at a time. So what we focused on when his first tenure, like the first game against New Zealand, was it back in 2018 now, I think. He just no, it wasn't 2018, 2021, I think 2022, whenever it was. So he focused on obviously just defense, and that was what he wanted. He wanted to have that autumn just start develop defense, and then the Six Nations after that was all out attack, right? So he obviously had two Six Nations, so he just wanted to develop the attack, and then I think it was more sort of, okay, now let's start providing sort of the pragmatic, the game management element, which we've always lacked, certainly at a high level. He tried to sort of bring that in slowly, but obviously Quesada being the master tactician that he is, and obviously I speak to a lot of the players, and he is very highly regarded. He obviously established that as, frankly, like some low hanging fruit for us to be more competitive, and he's actually tried to develop that. So what I envision seeing is a lot more pragmatic play, playing to our advantage. If we get quick ball, we're very dangerous. I know obviously that's something that we want to focus on as well. So assuming we're respecting the ball in attack, I think we're probably going to see a more attacking Italy, hopefully in the right places, like you said. And like I said, defensively, game management, rugby IQ, just better decisions, and hopefully, keeping ourselves in it so that the last sort of 15, 20 minutes of the game, where traditionally we were quite weak, that's where we score most of our points. So if we can stay in the game come 15, 20 minutes, I think, we back our fitness as a team, and let's see sort of where we get from there.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, the other thing about this Italian team, which has probably developed in the last 2 or 3 years now, is there's no discernible weaknesses really. Like in previous incarnations, you'd always think, right, we can definitely take them there, and you'd fall down because of that. Now, I think the Italian squad is well rounded throughout the team, 1 to 15, and all the way up to 23.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I do think there is areas where traditionally we've faltered, and candidly, I think if teams effectively employ a power game against us, certainly England, France, the teams that can bully up front, I think they'll get a lot of change. And actually, we saw England deploy that against Ireland last year effectively, and we saw sort of the amount of damage that they can do when it goes right. So I think that's still going to be potentially an issue, but where that's potentially a weakness of Italy, that could also be perceived as a weakness of the teams that do have those bigger, heavier forwards, because like I said, we back our fitness, and we back our mobility, and we back the fact that we have skillful forwards now. So it's one of those where I it's tough, because obviously rugby is a game built on physicality, and if a team gets that right, I do think that's potentially an area of weakness for us. But like I said, it's a bit of a double-edged sword at the moment.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, interesting. Is there any other players or any other sort of factors that we haven't mentioned yet that you want to sort of bring up in terms of this year's tournament?
I think I think obviously, like I said, you ride waves of momentum, and Benetton with the Champions Cup, and I thought there were, frankly, I could say this. I thought they were robbed at the end of the Bristol game, with the TMO arguing with the ref for 5 minutes as to why he shouldn't be able to award that try. But they have proved, playing some of the best club teams possibly in the world, frankly, like La Rochelle, Bristol, beat Bath, playing the upper echelons of club rugby teams, that they can compete. And that's Benetton, and they have contributed to this particular squad 17 national team players. So if we can take advantage of the momentum and the excitement behind Italian rugby, and obviously utilize that to our advantage, I do think that's probably a factor that people probably undervalue, because we've never really been in that position before. Never. So having the Italian teams perform well at club level, hopefully that translates to a quicker start, because again, traditionally we start quite slow. The first game is always tough. The second game's normally tough, and if you look at where we traditionally win our games, it's normally sort of the back end of the Six Nations. So yeah, let's hope that transitions into a quicker start, and let's see what comes.
Yeah, for sure. And how do you think the tournament's going to pan out for Italy, Mike? Like, what and also a secondary question: what does success look like for Italy in this tournament this year?
Yeah, I think I'll start off with the success, because I think it sort of ultimately translates to your first question. But I think success would be taking a step forward, right, and staying competitive throughout all 5 games, and making sure that we're giving teams headaches, regardless, obviously we played well against England, and then we were absolutely, smashed last year against Ireland as an example. And then obviously we were unfortunate against France, and we ended up winning the last 2 games. But I think if we can stay competitive and ensure that we're taking a step up, because frankly, I think every team is probably going to take a step up. England were in a development phase, and they're going to be a lot tougher this year. And Wales, obviously, I'm fortunate where they are, but obviously the Welsh are always going to be dangerous, and they'll be taking a step up. As long as we can make equal, or ideally like a slightly larger step from last year, then I think we could potentially put a couple of teams under pressure. Obviously, trying to pick a team that we could possibly beat is always interesting. Like I said, I think people will look at sort of the Welsh performances from last year and think they're probably slightly easier than they actually are going to be. But I think we could, at our best, probably give every team a headache. So that's what I want to see. Whether we win, whether we lose, it's about performance. And realistically, this is all about 2027 for us as well. And we want to try and, push on the biggest stage and prove, that we are a proud rugby nation who deserve to be in these major competitions and can compete with the best. So that's what I'm hoping to see.
Yeah, fantastic. And I love Italian rugby, and one of the things I like about it the most is the kit. So Mike, just sort of straighten up a little bit and show people that shirt you're wearing as well, because that's a beauty.
So this was this year's kit. Got it as a kind Christmas present. So I thought I'd pop it on for this particular one. But it was it's a nice old kit this year. So
Yeah, happy days. Okay, people at home, that's what we think. But what do you think? Are there any key points that we've missed between us? Any players that we didn't mention that you think might play a crucial role for Italy in this upcoming 6 Nations? Let's have that in the comments down below, and we'll join you there for a friendly conversation. And give this video a thumbs up if you don't mind while you're down there. It helps other people find it. So it just leaves me to say, Mike, thanks so much for your time. And if people want to follow you and hear more about the incredible insight that you give on your podcast, how will people follow you?
Yeah, no, thank you very much for having me. It's been absolute joy to speak, to people who are interested about Italian rugby. So for those of you guys who want to hear a little bit more, we have the podcast Fratelli D'Rugby. We're on sort of all major podcast platforms, and we do a YouTube live weekly, typically on Mondays around about 7:30 p.m. UK, 8:30 p.m. Italian time. So if you guys want to hear a little bit more about what we talk about, feel free to tune in. Yeah,
and you interview all the top players as well, right?
Yeah, we've been quite fortunate about that, actually. So we like I said, we've been fortunate enough to have quite a few of the coaching staff, and the Italian players are normally really good about giving up their time because they understand that it's important that we need to grow the game, even or especially I suppose in the Anglo-speaking world. So if you guys want to hear a little bit more from the horse's mouths, as it were, we do have quite a few players on. So
Okay, good stuff. Thanks again, Mike. And for you at home, you can subscribe there. You can watch that one next, and do not forget to get out and play.